Before we dive into today's Reddit Tales story, if you're into real-life relationship drama, jaw-dropping receipts, and karma that hits like a truck, make sure you're subscribed. It's the easiest way to support the channel, and it keeps Reddit Tales coming. Now, let's get into it. Jake and I were together for 3 years. The first 2 years weren't perfect, but they were normal. Arguments about chores, small misunderstandings, the usual couple stuff. But the last year? The last year felt like living in a slow-motion interrogation. It started subtly. A playful question here and there. A casual glance at my screen. Then it escalated into full-on suspicion as a lifestyle. He'd check my phone whenever he could, just to see something, he'd say, like it was innocent. He'd ask where I was going and how long I'd be, then act like my answers were evidence he needed to cross-check. If a male co-worker texted me about work, Jake would become weirdly tense, like my job itself was a threat to him. The most humiliating part? The jokes. He'd say things in front of our friends like, "Careful, she'll run off with the bartender," or "Don't flirt too hard, babe," with that fake smile that forced me to either laugh or look guilty. And when I'd get upset, he'd flip it on me. "Why are you so defensive?" he'd say. Guilty people get defensive. I wasn't guilty. I never cheated. Not emotionally, not physically, not even accidentally. I was loyal to a man who treated loyalty like a confession waiting to happen. At some point, I started doing what a lot of people do in toxic relationships. I tried harder. I over-explained where I was. I sent extra updates. I avoided harmless interactions just to keep the peace. I convinced myself that if I proved I was trustworthy enough, he'd finally relax. Instead, he got worse because it was never about reassurance. It was about control. And I didn't realize how much of it was projection until Teresa stepped in. Teresa has been my best friend since high school. The kind of best friend who knows your childhood home, your favorite comfort food, and exactly what your "I'm fine" voice sounds like when you're not fine. One night, after another one of Jake's episodes, Teresa came over. Jake was at work. I was on the couch, exhausted, showing her the latest messages. Jake accusing me of meeting someone because I got home 15 minutes late from grocery shopping. 15 minutes. Teresa read the texts and didn't laugh. She didn't roll her eyes. She got quiet. Then she said, "I need to show you something." She pulled out her phone and opened a dating app. And there it was, Jake's profile. Active. Updated that day. His bio said he was single. Not "it's complicated." Not "recently out of a relationship." Single. Available. Looking for fun. My stomach went cold so fast I felt dizzy. Teresa swallowed hard and admitted she'd suspected for weeks. A friend of hers matched with him, recognized him as my boyfriend from pictures on my social media, and told Teresa. Teresa didn't tell me immediately because she didn't want to drop a bomb without being absolutely certain. So she did what Teresa always does. She gathered proof before she spoke. I stared at Jake's profile like it was an optical illusion. Like if I blinked enough times, it would disappear. But it didn't. And the most painful part wasn't even the profile itself. It was the realization that he'd been accusing me of cheating while he was actively advertising himself to strangers. That night, Teresa and I didn't cry for long. We sat at my kitchen table, looking at each other like two people realizing a storm was coming. And then Teresa said the sentence that changed everything. "Do you want to confront him? Or do you want to catch him?" I didn't answer immediately. My hands were shaking. My throat felt tight. But in my head, something hardened into place. Because I was done being questioned, done being humiliated, done trying to prove something to someone who had already decided to see me as guilty. So I told Teresa the truth. I don't just want to catch him. I want him to feel what he's done. Teresa nodded once. Slow. Serious. And then she said, "Okay, then we do this smart." We built the plan in layers, like we were handling something fragile and dangerous. Teresa created a fake profile. Nothing ridiculous, just believable enough that Jake wouldn't question it. She used photos that didn't resemble anyone in our circle, kept the details simple, and swiped until Jake appeared. They matched within hours. That alone felt like a punch. He didn't hesitate. Not even a day. Not even a cautious "hey." He went straight into it like he'd been waiting for permission. Their chats turned gross fast. Not just flirty, cruel. He told her he was single. He complained about his psycho ex, meaning me, and said he was trying to get out of the relationship, but I wouldn't take the hint. Teresa played along, asking why he didn't just end it. Jake's reply is still burned into my brain. She pays half the rent and does all the cooking and cleaning. Why give that up until I find something better? I remember reading it and feeling my body go numb, like my brain couldn't process that a human being could say something that cold about someone who loved them. And then it got worse. Jake started sending Teresa screenshots of his conversations with other women, multiple women. And in those chats, they didn't just talk about meeting up. They mocked me. He called me disgusting, said repulsive things, wrote that he almost gagged when I tried to kiss him. And women, strangers, joined in like it was a game. One message said something like, "You're a saint for dealing with her," and Jake replied, "It's complicated, but not for long. Promise." I felt like I was reading a script where I was the punchline. All while Jake was at home, eating the meals I cooked, wearing the clothes I washed, sleeping next to me like he didn't hate me behind my back. That night, Teresa stayed with me while I stared at the screenshots. The betrayal was so layered it felt unreal. He was cheating. He was lying about being single. He was using me for rent and labor. He was humiliating me for sport. And while all of that was happening, he had the nerve to accuse me of cheating because a coworker texted about a meeting. At first, I wanted to confront him immediately, throw the screenshots in his face, and watch him scramble. But Teresa stopped me. "Not yet," she said. "If you confront him now, he'll lie. He'll cry. He'll twist it. And you'll leave with nothing except trauma." She was right. We needed more than proof. We needed a plan. Not to win him back. To end this in a way that he could never spin into a story where he was the victim. So for the next few weeks, I played the perfect girlfriend. I smiled when he kissed me goodbye in the morning. I cooked his favorite dinners. I folded his laundry. I apologized when he accused me of flirting with the delivery guy who literally dropped off food and left. And every time I did one of those things, I felt something shift. I wasn't doing it for him anymore. I was doing it because I knew it would make the ending hit harder. Jake came home late one night smelling like unfamiliar perfume. When I mentioned it casually, he got angry and told me I was paranoid. Then he said something that made my blood boil. "Maybe you should talk to someone about your insecurities. You haven't been yourself lately." So not only was he cheating, he was trying to paint me as unstable. I smiled and apologized. But inside, I started keeping a list, not just of evidence, of reasons. And that's when I started looking at our finances. Because if Jake's greatest love was control, his second love was his ego. And his ego was attached to his money. Jake loved bragging about how disciplined he was. He'd talk about savings like it was a personality trait, like being good with money made him morally superior. He'd mention our future with his smug confidence, like he was building something solid. So I checked. We had a joint account for bills. Jake also had a private savings account he was proud of, the one he acted like I wasn't allowed to question. When I reviewed statements, patterns jumped out immediately. Withdrawals on nights he claimed he was working late. Expensive restaurants. Hotel charges. Gift shop purchases. It wasn't even subtle. He wasn't just cheating emotionally. He was spending money like he had a second life. And that's when I knew exactly where to hit him. His ego and his wallet. That same week, Teresa and I met up with my cousin Vicky. Vicky and I have been compared our entire lives. Same dark hair, similar features. Except Vicky was always introduced as the prettier version. Taller, more confident, the kind of girl who walked into a room and heads turned without effort. She owed me a favor. I'd helped her survive a brutal breakup the year before when she'd been completely wrecked. When I told Vicky what Jake had been doing, especially the mental games, her face changed. Not shocked, furious. "That's not just cheating," she said. "That's emotional abuse." Teresa showed her the screenshots, the dating profile, the messages. Vicky stared at the screen like she wanted to throw the phone through a wall. "Okay," she said finally. "What do you need from me?" Teresa and I looked at each other. We didn't even have to say it out loud, because we already had an idea forming, one that would lure Jake straight into his own consequences. The concept was simple. Jake loved attention. He loved the chase. He loved feeling like he was upgrading. So we gave him exactly what he thought he wanted. Vicky would accidentally run into him at his gym. Jake went every Tuesday and Thursday like clockwork. He posted workout selfies with timestamps like a predictable cartoon villain. We knew his schedule. Vicky got a guest pass through a friend. We studied his routine. We picked the exact day. Operation Takedown began on a Thursday. Vicky wore leggings so outrageous, even I did a double take, and she positioned herself close enough to be noticed, but not so close it looked intentional. She texted me, "Target acquired." He hasn't stopped staring. What happened next was so predictable, it was almost boring. Jake accidentally bumped into her near the towel rack. He started talking about supplements and training. He asked for her number to share workout tips. By that evening, he was already texting her. I sat on my couch with Vicky and Teresa, reading every message. My stomach was twisted in knots, but the clarity was brutal. Jake wasn't confused. Jake wasn't lonely. Jake wasn't working through issues. Jake was simply who he was. The texts were immediate compliments. Then curiosity. Then, "Are you seeing anyone?" He didn't even pretend to be loyal. And the wildest part? He had no idea Vicky was my cousin. We look similar if you pay attention. But Jake hadn't been paying attention to me in a long time. The plan wasn't about romance. It was about exposure. Vicky would let Jake believe he was winning. Let him chase. Let him spend. Let him show his true self fully. Meanwhile, I would keep acting like the oblivious girlfriend at home. And when the time was right, we'd pull the curtain. Jake told me he had a work event 3 days later. I kissed him goodbye, told him to have fun, smiled like everything was fine. Then I drove straight to Teresa's apartment, where we watched Vicky's live updates like it was a reality show. Jake took Vicky to a restaurant I'd mentioned for our anniversary, more than once. He ordered expensive wine, bragged about his job, bragged about his savings, bragged about how he was basically single. Vicky texted. He said he's wrapping up a dead-end relationship. Dead-end relationship. That was me. Seeing it play out in real time was surreal. My boyfriend on a date with my cousin, while I sat on my best friend's couch eating popcorn, listening to my own life crack in half. Jake became obsessed faster than any of us expected. He started canceling plans with me, staying out later, coming home with that smug look like he had a secret prize. Vicky, meanwhile, played it perfectly, close enough to keep him hooked, distant enough to keep him chasing. The spending escalated. Dinners became gifts. Gifts became bigger gifts. He started buying things to impress her, jewelry, concert tickets, weekend getaways. He'd never spent like that on me. Not because he couldn't, because he didn't want to. And every time he spent on Vicky, he came home and lectured me about being financially responsible. That's when the emotional damage turned into something colder. Because it wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was disrespect, strategically delivered. Vicky started handing us proof, messages, recordings, confirmations, dates, receipts, everything that showed how Jake talked about me when he thought I couldn't hear. He called me clingy, called me oblivious, said I was convenient. At one point, Vicky sent a voice recording where Jake joked that I was like a household appliance that also pays rent. I don't even remember standing up, but I remember the sound of glass cracking when it hit the wall. Teresa rushed to help me clean up before Jake came home. I wasn't proud of that moment, but I was proud that I didn't break the plan, because the plan had become bigger than my feelings. It had become about reclaiming my dignity. While Jake dug himself deeper, I quietly prepare my exit. New bank account. Mail redirected. Important documents moved slowly. A new apartment lined up with Teresa's help. Jake didn't notice any of it, because Jake didn't notice me. And then something happened that nearly made me laugh from sheer disbelief. Jake started complaining about unexpected expenses and told me we might need to tighten our budget. The man was draining money for secret dates while asking his girlfriend to be his financial safety net. And just when I thought he couldn't get more delusional, he did. Because one night, after weeks of chaos, Jake came home stressed and told me he wanted to talk. I thought, this is it. He's finally breaking up with me. Instead, he got down on one knee and pulled out a ring. A small ring. Nothing like the big promises he used to make. The kind of ring that screamed, "I'm broke, but need to lock this down." He started talking about realizing what matters. About starting fresh. about how he wanted to spend his life with me. I stared at him, frozen. Was he trying to trap me with an engagement while he continued his other life? Was he panicking because he was losing control? Either way, it was pathetic, and I did the only thing that bought me time. I cried. Not clean tears. Not romantic tears. Angry tears. And I told him I needed time to think. Jake looked crushed, but he agreed. He even suggested I stay with family to clear my head. I almost laughed because I knew what that was, an attempt to get me out of the apartment so he could bring Vicky over. I packed a bag and went straight to Teresa's. The moment I walked in, I called Vicky, and we all agreed on the same thing. Jake just accelerated the endgame. Over the next week, I stayed with Teresa but kept daily contact with Jake, just enough to keep him calm. I'm still thinking. I need time. I'm processing everything. Jake responded with desperate messages about love and commitment, like he hadn't been calling me disgusting behind my back. Then, 10 days after the proposal, Jake called and said he needed to see me in person. My stomach dropped. Not fear, more like adrenaline. Teresa suggested precautions. She had a tiny mic from her journalism days. We planned it so she could stay nearby, just in case. We met at a coffee shop. Jake looked like a man drowning. He didn't bring up the proposal first. He brought up money. He admitted he'd made bad financial decisions. He said he was stressed, in trouble, overwhelmed. He talked about debt like it was a sudden weather event that happened to him, not something he chose. Then he asked for the most audacious thing I'd ever heard. He wanted me to take out a loan in my name to consolidate his debts. He promised he'd pay it back, so it would be temporary, so it could be a new beginning for us, proof we were a team. A team. I sat there staring at him, trying not to react. This man was funding secret dates and luxury plans while asking me to go into debt for him. I told him I needed time to think. He nodded like he'd expected that, like he could still steer me. When I got back into Teresa's car, she and I just stared at each other for half a second, and then we laughed. Not because it was funny, because the nerve was almost artistic. Vicky immediately started planning the final phase. Jake was already planning an expensive tropical vacation with Vicky, something absurdly luxurious. Deposits, flights, resort bookings, all non-refundable. He was burning his own finances to impress her, and now he wanted me to be the safety net underneath his fall. We decided to let him believe help was coming, just long enough for him to finish digging. Vicky told Jake she'd gotten a bonus and could contribute to the vacation. She hyped him up, pushed him to finalize bookings, made him feel like the dream was guaranteed. Jake locked everything in. A huge amount of money. Gone. Non-refundable. Scheduled in 2 weeks. We now had a deadline. 12 days. That's all we needed. Jake spent those days becoming a mess, juggling texts, acting overly sweet to me, acting obsessed with Vicky, spiraling about money, and still trying to keep his lies balanced. Meanwhile, I was moving my last remaining belongings quietly. Clothes, personal items, anything important. The night before the trip, I told Jake I needed space, and I'd be staying with Teresa for a few days to think about our future. He hugged me tightly and told me he hoped I'd have an answer when he got back from his business trip. The lies came out so smoothly, it almost scared me. But the second I closed that apartment door, our countdown started. Because the next morning, Jake thought he was heading to the airport for the romantic getaway of a lifetime. He had no idea he was about to have the worst day of his life. We barely slept, the kind of anticipation that makes your body buzz. At 6 a.m., Vicky texted Jake, "Good morning. So excited. Can't wait to see you at the airport." Jake replied instantly, "Terminal 3 at 8:30. Can't believe we're finally doing this." At 7 a.m., we watched through Teresa's building security feed as Jake left with his suitcase, looking happier than he'd looked in months. That happiness made me sick, not because I wanted him, because I realized how easily he could pretend. We drove to the airport, not to fly anywhere, just to witness. We positioned ourselves at a cafe with a view of the check-in counters. I wore a hat, kept my head down, and tried to steady my breathing. Jake arrived, scanning the area eagerly, phone in hand. He looked like a kid waiting for a surprise gift. He texted Vicky, checked his phone again, then joined the check-in line. At exactly the right moment, when he was close enough to the counter that the reality of travel felt official. Vicky sent the message we'd crafted. A selfie of the three of us together. Me, Vicky, Teresa, smiling wide. Under it, surprise. Hope you enjoy your vacation for one. Your girlfriend knows everything. Jake froze. His expression changed so fast, it was almost cinematic. Confusion, then shock, then a kind of horror that drained all color from his face. He stepped out of line, staring at his phone like it was burning him. He tried calling Vicky. Blocked. He tried calling me. Blocked. He looked around wildly like he expected to see us, standing there laughing in his face. But we stayed still, watching from the cafe like ghosts. He sat down on a bench, hunched over, typing frantic messages into the void. For almost 20 minutes, he just spiraled. Then he stood up and walked toward the exit, dragging his suitcase behind him like it weighed 1,000 pounds. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like closure taking shape. Later that day, he tried contacting us from different numbers. Emails, unknown calls, voicemails that went from begging to anger to bargaining. We ignored everything, because the airport humiliation wasn't the only ending. There was one more thing. I'd left a letter on the kitchen table back at the apartment. Carefully written, calm, factual, explaining that I knew everything and that any harassment would have consequences. Printed pages were included too, some of the cruelest messages he'd written about me. Not the whole folder, just enough, because he deserved to see his own words in ink. That evening he showed up at the apartment and discovered he couldn't get in. The security camera caught the moment he realized he'd been locked out of the life he thought he controlled. He slammed the hallway wall, shouted, tried the handle again and again. Then he slid down the wall like a man whose script got stolen mid-scene. For the first time, Jake wasn't directing the narrative. He was trapped in it, and he still didn't realize how much he'd lose after that. Over the next few days, Jake cycled through every emotion. He sent emails begging forgiveness, then angry ones calling us cruel, then panicked ones about money, how he could lose his job, how he was drowning, how he needed help. It was incredible, the lack of self-awareness. He treated me like garbage, cheated repeatedly, tried to manipulate me into debt, and still believed he deserved sympathy when consequences arrived. A week after the airport, we did something simple. We took ourselves somewhere peaceful. A spa weekend. Hot tubs. Silence. Space to breathe. Not as a flex. As a reminder that my life didn't have to revolve around a man who enjoyed tearing me down. Jake, of course, found a way to message through someone else's phone, spiraling again, claiming we destroyed him. As if he hadn't been destroying me for a year. In the months after, he tried every tactic. New numbers, letters, late-night doorbell videos, dramatic apologies. One night he showed up at my building drunk, crying into the camera about how he'd made the biggest mistake of his life and would do anything for another chance. I watched from my bed, safe, warm, calm. Then I did the most reasonable thing. I forwarded the footage to building security. He got removed, and I slept like a baby. Jake's finances collapsed under the weight of his own choices. Debt, loans, ruined credit, a life spent chasing validation he couldn't afford. Meanwhile, I rebuilt. New apartment, better work performance, promotions, real friendships, peace. And yes, every time I put on something nice or held my head high, I remembered the truth. He wanted me insecure because it made me easier to control. And the moment I stopped begging for his approval, he lost power. That's the part people don't understand about karma. Sometimes karma isn't lightning from the sky. Sometimes it's simply the moment someone you underestimated realizes they don't need you anymore. And that moment is brutal. So if you're watching this and you're in a relationship where you're constantly being accused, questioned, mocked, or made to feel guilty for things you didn't do, please hear me. That isn't love. That's control wearing love's costume. And you deserve better.